Hey everyone, this is Kase here with The Weekend Gamer, and I'm talking to author Troy Denning. How you doing today, Troy?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Okay, I'm so excited to be here. This is my first day, and I've never been to a Star Wars convention. This is like your 20 millionth one, or how many times have you been here?
It's my fourth Star Wars convention, but I've been to Gen Cons and other kinds of convention, Comic Cons and stuff, so it's fairly old hat for me, but it's still very, very exciting. I enjoy them. I come in for only 2 or 3 days. I don't have to work real hard. They take me to dinner. People stroke my ego. What's not to like?
This sounds like the life. So tell me, how did you first get involved in writing books within the Star Wars series?
I first became involved in it when I don't know the year, a few years ago, when I sent them a sample. I'd heard that they were looking for new authors for the Star Wars line when Del Rey took over the line from Bantam. And I heard that they were looking for authors for that, so I sent in a sample and said I'd be interested in writing. I didn't hear anything for 6 months. I thought nothing's going to come of it, and then the next thing was, hey, we'd like to offer you a contract. And I thought they'd, skipped a few steps, like, what am I going to write, anything like that.
So what's your storyline? They didn't care about all that, huh?
No, I just said yes. Yeah, and then.
Now, how did you get involved just initially? Were you always writing? Have you been writing all your life, or this is just something completely new for you?
I published my first novel in 1989. It was Waterdeep, which in the Forgotten Realms for TSR at the time, which are the people who did Dungeons and Dragons. And my first job out of college was as an editor for TSR. So that's kind of how I had the in to know that this was writing, that this was a possibility.
Now, how do you come up with your different storylines? I'm not, to be honest, that familiar with how this works, that you take the Star Wars series and then do you just think of a different character and say, you know what, I think he should do this, or how does that work?
Usually you have a core of an idea. I'll either have the core of an idea. I'd like to write a book about, for instance, bugs, and then I'll say, well, what would I have to do to make that story interesting? And I'll just start asking myself question after question after question. So the first question, for instance, with a story about bugs, the Killiks, would be, what do I do to make these creatures, these insects, interesting to a reader? What do I have to do to make them attractive? Because nobody wants to read about, box elder bugs. It's not sexy.
And especially to Star Wars fans, readers, you have to be specific to what they're looking for. So is that hard? Because there's some pretty hardcore fans here. So if you go too far off, do you ever get like people knocking on your door or pulling you over on the street? Like, how does that work? Is there some? I imagine there's some tension, and I got to get it right.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm a fan, so I've been a fan since way back. The first time I was ever involved in a Star Wars project was when West End Games published their role-playing game back in the early 90s, and I wrote Galaxy Guide 4 for them, which was basically a nerd's dream come true. They said, take a look at the alien scene and the cantina scene in New Hope over and over again and write a backstory for each of the species that are in that scene. So it was awesome, yeah.
This one, he did this, and his mom was like this, and you just, anything you wanted, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It was great. So I did that, but being a fan, it's very easy for me to decide what I have to do, because I have to do what I would want to see in a story. And that's always the way that it's best to write anyway.
You hear that it's right from the fans to the fans, so you can't really mess up with that.
Yeah.
Now I'm wondering, is there a specific storyline that's one of your favorites in all of your the lines of books that you've done so far? Or a heroine or hero that you really kind of like, yeah, that's my man, that's my girl?
Yeah, the one I'm working on currently is always my favorite. Or actually, I should say the one I just finished is always my favorite, because you've got to be in love with what you're doing. So excluding the one that I'm working on now, which is Invincible, the last book in the Legacy of the Force series, I would say that Star by Star, which was my first big Star Wars novel, is my favorite because it was my first.
You always love your first.
Yeah,
you gotta love your first.
Yep. You always love your first. Yep.
Now, a couple more questions. How would someone get involved in doing this themselves? And then also, how could they find out about your books? Like, coming to the convention, of course, but any other ways they can find out more about you and your books?
Right. To become involved in writing Star Wars fiction yourself, the first thing you have to do is, you really should ask Shelley that, the editor, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because I know I've heard her tell people a million times, so I'm paraphrasing. But basically, you have to become a well-established science fiction or fantasy author yourself. For instance, I'd written like 20 books before I was asked to do a Star Wars book. And you have to have at least 1 or 2 with a major publisher. Then you just send them a letter asking if they'd like to see some of your work. and then they would, you'd send them a published book, and then if they like it, they would get back in touch with you.
Well, you hear that, Mo? I'm putting in my notice now. I'm going to go ahead and talk to Shelly because I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'll be your competition, or maybe we can work together and do a couple together.
Yeah.
Possibility.
Yeah, talk to Shelly.
Talk to Shelly. Now, how can they find your books if someone wants to, get a couple of them?
You can go to any bookstore. I won't any major bookstore and probably most minor, smaller bookstores, and just ask for a book by Troy Denning. Or in the front of most of my Star Wars books is a list of all the books that I've written, so you could do that.
Okay. Do you have a website that someone can?
No, I don't have a website.
Oh, we have to get Troy a website.
I have a website designed, but not written. Okay, I've got all my pictures ready. I've got all of everything except the text. Now that's the part I have to provide.
The writing is the hardest part for you.
Yeah, it's like the plumber with the leaky pipes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right, Troy. Somebody out there, contact Troy and help him out with getting that website going.
Yeah.
I do have one last question for you. Here at The Weekend Gamer, we want to ask you, what's your game? Besides writing these wonderful stories that have everyone's head spinning, what else do you like to do? What's your game?
Texas Hold'em. I'm a fanatic small-time poker player, and I'm only good enough to play small time. So yeah.
You lose a lot?
No, I win at my level, but I don't win a lot, because my level's small time.
Troy, it was so nice talking to you. Thank you for taking the time out to, give us a little insight, and we really appreciate it, okay?
Thanks for having me.
All right, you enjoy the rest of the weekend.
All right, you too.
All right, bye.
Bye.